Jack Murphy stood before the Galactic Council for the 47th time this cycle, wearing what his colleagues had begun calling his "I'm going to regret this" face. The massive chamber, with its swooping crystalline architecture and floating delegate pods, still managed to impress despite his countless visits. What failed to impress him, however, was the Council's persistent ability to ignore every single warning humanity tried to give them. Distinguished delegates, Jack began, forcing his face into what he hoped was a diplomatic smile rather than a grimace. "I stand before you once again to discuss the matter of the Epsilon Proxima system. As Earth's representative, I must insist." Representative Murphy interrupted Delegate Vorthak, his tentacles rippling in what Jack had learned was the Zentarian equivalent of an eye roll. "We have heard Earth's concerns regarding this matter. The Harvest Fleet has already been commissioned." Jack pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture that had become his trademark in council meetings. "With all due respect, Delegate Vorthak, you're making a mistake. There's a reason we quarantined that system. There's a reason we put up those warning beacons. There's a reason we're jumping through diplomatic hoops trying to convince you all to stay away." Yes, chittered Delegate NX Tara, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns of barely concealed amusement. "Your species is concerned about, what was it?" Poking the bear, her universal translator struggled with the idiom, rendering the last words in a confused tone. "That's not exactly," Jack started. "I failed to see how local ursine wildlife factors into this discussion," interrupted Delegate Krevan, his holographic form flickering with confusion. "Our scans show no large mammalian life forms in the target system." Jack closed his eyes and counted to 10, a human stress management technique that had saved countless diplomatic incidents over the years. "It's an expression," he explained, "not for the first time. It means don't provoke something dangerous." "Ah," said Vorthak, his tentacles now writhing in what Jack recognized as condescension, "but our scans show nothing dangerous. Only valuable resources ripe for harvesting. Perhaps your primitive scanning technology has led to some misunderstanding." The word primitive hit Jack's ears like nails on a chalkboard, another expression he'd given up trying to explain to the Council. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 15 years, and in that time they'd been dismissed as primitive no fewer than 2,847 times. Jack kept count. "Look," Jack said, abandoning diplomacy for bluntness, "you're about to step on a landmine here. And before you ask, no, I don't mean a literal explosive device buried in the ground. I mean you're about to make a catastrophic mistake that we've been trying to help you avoid." The council chamber erupted in the various sounds of multiple species laughing. Jack had grown familiar with them all, the crystalline chiming of the NX Tara, the wet gurgling of the Zentarians, the digital harmonics of the Krevan holograms. He'd even categorized them in his reports back to Earth, rating them on a scale from mildly annoying to makes me want to find a new career. Representative Murphy. Vorthak said, his translator struggling to maintain a serious tone through his amusement. "While we appreciate Earth's enthusiastic participation in council matters, we must proceed with the harvest. The resources in the Epsilon Proxima system are too valuable to ignore based on the superstitions of a species that only achieved FTL travel within living memory." Jack felt a headache coming on. He'd tried being diplomatic. He'd tried being direct. He'd even tried using small words. Now he was down to his last resort, the truth. "Fine," he said, straightening his posture and adopting what his assistant called his doom prophet voice. "But remember this moment. Remember that we warned you. Remember that we tried to stop you. And when everything goes sideways, and trust me, it will remember that humanity told you exactly what would happen if you didn't leave well enough alone." Sideways, Delegate NX Tara chimed in confusion. "How can things go perpendicular to the standard plane of?" "It's another expression," Jack shouted, finally losing his composure. "Just remember we tried to warn you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to contact Earth. We have preparations to make." As Jack stormed out of the council chamber, he could hear the delegates already discussing harvest quotas and resource distribution. He pulled out his communicator and sent a simple message back to Earth Command. "They're not listening. Initiate protocol, told you so." The response came back almost immediately, acknowledged. Did they at least understand the bear thing this time? Jack didn't bother responding. He had a feeling that very soon, the council would understand all too well what it meant to poke a bear. He just hoped they survived the lesson. The thing about warnings, Jack mused as he headed back to the Earth Embassy. was that they tended to make a lot more sense in hindsight. He remembered the first time Earth had tried to warn the Council about Epsilon Proxima, almost 5 years ago. Back then, he'd been optimistic, believing that surely any reasonable species would listen to simple logic and clear evidence. He'd been so young, so naive. The memory played back in his mind as clearly as if it were yesterday, probably because he'd replayed the Council recording at least once a week since then, each time adding new notes to his ever-growing file labeled evidence that we totally told them so. It had been during Earth's formal introduction to the galactic community. Humanity had just finished presenting their credentials, their technological achievements, and their hopes for peaceful cooperation. That's when Delegate Craxtell had brought up the subject of resource-rich systems in Earth's sector. Craxtell, with his floating orb-like body and precisely arranged tentacles, each one supposedly representing a different academic degree, had been the very picture of pompous authority. "We notice," he had said in that peculiar whistling tone of his, "that you have placed rather aggressive warning beacons around the Epsilon Proxima system. Surely you don't intend to claim such a valuable system for yourself." The human delegation had exchanged looks that, in retrospect, probably should have set off some warning bells for the Council. Admiral Chen had stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. "The beacons aren't a claim," she'd explained. "They're a warning. That system is off limits for everyone's safety, including ours." Safety, Craxtell had laughed a sound like wind chimes in a blender. "Our scans show no significant threats, no hostile species, no unstable stellar phenomena, no spatial anomalies. What exactly are you warning us about?" Admiral Chen had smiled then, and Jack remembered thinking it was the kind of smile that should come with its own warning label. "Let me put this in terms that the Council might appreciate," she'd said. "You know how every species has that one thing they're really good at? The Zentarians have their bioengineering, the NX Tara have their crystal tech, the Krevan have their quantum computing." The delegates had preened at the recognition of their species' achievements. "Well," Chen had continued, "humans have a particular talent too. We're really good at finding things that should not be messed with, and then documenting, in excruciating detail, exactly why they should not be messed with." "Are you suggesting," Craxtell had scoffed, his tentacles curling in amusement, "that we should avoid an entire resource-rich system because of some human intuition?" "No," Chen had replied, a smile never wavering. "I'm telling you that we've already messed with it, documented exactly why no one should mess with it again, and now we're trying to save you from having to learn that lesson the hard way." That's when Craxtell had made what Jack now considered the defining statement of the Council's attitude toward humanity. "Distinguished delegates," he'd announced, his tentacles splaying in a gesture of theatrical dismissal, "while we appreciate the enthusiasm of our new members, we cannot allow the primitive fears of a juvenile species to restrict access to valuable resources. These humans barely understand quantum mechanics, and they expect us to take their warnings seriously." The Council chamber had erupted in agreement, and that had been that. Earth's warning had been officially noted, officially dismissed, and officially filed away under primitive species' cute but irrelevant concerns. 5 years later, Jack found himself back at his desk in the Earth Embassy, staring at the latest report from the observation posts near Epsilon Proxima. The Harvest Fleet was already assembling. According to their flight plan, they would enter the system in less than a standard week. He opened his terminal and began composing a message to Earth Command. "Remember that thing we found in Epsilon Proxima? The thing that made us implement the oh hell no protocol? Well, the Council's about to rediscover it. Is that thing. Recommend we prepare the I Told You So task force, and maybe alert medical to prepare for cases of severe smugness overdose among our diplomatic corps." The response was almost immediate. "Task force on standby. Medical says smugness treatment protocols are already in place. They've been ready for this since the bear incident." Jack allowed himself a small smile. At least someone had learned from humanity's warnings, even if it was just humanity. He looked out his office window at the gleaming spires of the Council city. In less than a week, all those sophisticated, advanced, dismissive species would learn exactly why humans had quarantined that system. He almost felt bad about it. Almost. Captain Dana Martinez stood on the bridge of the EFS Schadenfreude, watching the tactical display with the kind of patience that came from absolute certainty that everything was about to go spectacularly wrong. The Harvest Fleet's formation was displayed in neat, color-coded lines, the kind of organization that practically begged the universe to mess with it. "They're actually doing it, Her XO," Commander Rodriguez said, shaking his head. "They're really going in there. Did they even read any of our reports?" "Oh, they read them," Martinez replied, taking a sip from her coffee mug emblazoned with "I warned you about this." "They just filed them under quaint human superstitions along with our warnings about AI development, our concerns about weaponized mathematics, and that strongly worded memo about not trying to domesticate space sharks." The bridge crew chuckled. The space shark incident had become legendary in human diplomatic circles, particularly the part where the Zentarians had insisted that their superior bioengineering would prevent any unfortunate incidents. The resulting cleanup had required 17 forms in triplicate, just to document the number of tentacles that needed regeneration. Martinez's comm unit chimed. "Captain, incoming transmission from Council Fleet Command," announced the communications officer. "They want to know why we have a response fleet positioned just outside the system border. Apparently we didn't file Form X-77B for suspicious fleet movements in proximity to resource acquisition operations." "Send them Form Q-12C," Martinez replied with a grin. "Notice of intent to say I told you so," the officer asked. "That's the one. Make sure to file it under urgent profound regret pending." The Harvest Fleet was now fully assembled, 50 ships of various sizes, all equipped with the latest in resource extraction technology. Their formation was a testament to alien efficiency, precision, and complete obliviousness to impending doom. Martinez opened a channel to the rest of her fleet. "All ships. This is Captain Martinez. As you know, we're here because someone's about to learn why humans put warning labels on things. Our mission is simple: wait for everything to go wrong. Try not to say I told you so too many times, and then help clean up the mess." She paused for effect. "We've prepared for this. We've run the simulations. We've even filled out all the paperwork, yes, even Form J109X for predicted catastrophic events resulting from ignored human advice. Remember your training. Keep your recording devices ready for posterior documentation. And maybe this time they'll listen when we tell them not to poke potentially civilization-ending phenomena with a stick." The bridge crew tried to maintain their professional composure, but Martinez could see the barely contained grins. They'd all been there when the Council had dismissed Earth's warnings. They'd all seen the footage of Craxtel's pompous pronouncements about primitive human fears. And they'd all volunteered for the "I told you so" task force specifically for this moment. Another comm alert chimed. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "Council Fleet Command is demanding we explain why our ships are equipped with what they're calling suspiciously specific containment equipment." Martinez smiled. "Send them Form D-23F. Preemptive response to inevitable consequences. With the appendix, for we really meant it when we said don't touch that." The tactical display updated, showing the Harvest Fleet beginning its approach into the Epsilon Proxima system. Martinez watched as the neat formations of ships moved closer to the thing that humans had discovered 5 years ago, the thing that had prompted the creation of no less than 27 new warning classifications and an entire subsection of emergency response protocols. "Captain," Rodriguez said, checking his console, "I've just received confirmation. All emergency response teams are on standby. Medical Bay is prepped for possible cases of reality dysfunction, and the Diplomatic Corps has prepared their 'We Warned You' presentation, complete with holographic reenactments and a detailed timeline of ignored warnings." "Excellent," Martinez replied, settling into her command chair. "Now we wait. How long until they reach the anomaly?" "At their current speed." "About 4 hours." "Perfect. Just enough time to finish all the paperwork for witnessing completely preventable disasters." She turned to her yeoman. "Make sure we file everything in triplicate. You know how the Council gets about proper documentation of their catastrophic mistakes." The yeoman nodded, already pulling up the necessary forms. Even in the face of impending disaster, bureaucracy demanded its due. Martinez took another sip from her coffee mug and watched the Harvest Fleet's steady progress. In a few hours, the Council would learn why humans had quarantined this system, and for once, all the paperwork was already filled out. The thing about cosmic horrors, as humanity had learned, was that they tended to have really inconvenient timing. The Harvest Fleet discovered this precisely 3 hours and 42 minutes into their expedition, just as Delegate Craxtel was finishing his speech about primitive superstitions. to the assembled council. And so he was saying, his tentacles arranged in their most scholarly configuration, we will demonstrate once and for all that human warnings are nothing more than. The emergency broadcast cut him off mid-pontificate. The council chamber's holographic displays erupted with images from the Harvest Fleet, and for a moment there was absolute silence. Then came the screaming. Jack Murphy, who had insisted on being present for this particular council session, calmly took out his tablet and began checking off items on his list titled "Signs you've just encountered what we warned you about." "Let's see," he muttered, just loud enough to be heard over the chaos. "Spontaneous reality distortions? Check. Non-Euclidean geometry where Euclidean geometry should definitely be? Check. That fun little thing where space starts looking like a Mobius strip had a baby with an Escher painting? Big check." On the main display, the Harvest Fleet's neat formation had transformed into something that hurt to look at. Ships weren't just out of position, they were in positions that shouldn't have been possible. One vessel appeared to be simultaneously above, below, and inside out relative to itself. Another had apparently decided to exist in 17 different dimensions at once, most of which hadn't existed until the ship tried to occupy them. "Oh," Jack added, making another check on his list. "And there's the part where the laws of physics start filing for divorce. Right on schedule." Captain Martinez's voice came through on the emergency channel, somehow managing to sound both professional and supremely unsurprised. "This is the EFS Schadenfreude to Council Fleet Command. We're tracking multiple reality fractures and at least 7 new types of spatial geometry that our mathematicians are very excited about. Would you like us to begin rescue operations, or should we wait for you to file Form R12X for permission to save your assets?" The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of panic. Delegate Vorthak's tentacles had tied themselves in knots. Delegate NX Tara's crystalline form was vibrating at a frequency that was causing nearby delegates to experience temporary synesthesia. The Krevan representatives were trying to calculate the probability that this was all a bad dream, but their quantum computers kept returning errors in base infinity. What Craxtel managed to whisper, all his tentacles drooping, "What is that thing?" Jack smiled. It was the smile of someone who had practiced this moment in front of a mirror. "Is that, distinguished delegates, is what we humans like to call a reality tumor. Or at least that's the simplified name we gave it. The full scientific designation includes 15 pages of warnings, 3 new branches of mathematics, and a quite impressive number of expletives." On the displays, the Harvest Fleet was learning some harsh lessons about the nature of reality. Specifically, that reality didn't appreciate being treated like a resource to be harvested. The thing humans had discovered in Epsilon Proxima, the thing they tried to warn everyone about, was essentially a knot in the fabric of space-time. A knot that, when disturbed, had a tendency to try out new and exciting ways of arranging matter and energy. "The good news," Jack continued, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining something obvious, "is that we've gotten pretty good at dealing with these things. The bad news is that your Harvest Fleet just gave it indigestion." As if on cue, the display showed one of the Harvest ships turn itself inside out, then right side in, then inside out again, before finally settling on existing in a quantum superposition of both states simultaneously. The crew's screams were coming through in 12 different languages, 3 of which had just been invented by the physics-bending properties of their situation. Martinez's voice came through again. "Council Fleet Command, be advised that we're launching containment procedures. Also, we're going to need you to fill out Form K99Z for acknowledgement of human warnings. In retrospect, we've taken the liberty of pre-filling most of it. You just need to sign where it says we should have listened." Jack stood up, straightening his diplomatic uniform. "Now, distinguished delegates, you have 2 choices. You can either continue to debate whether our primitive human understanding of reality warping space phenomena is worth your attention, or you can authorize our response team to fix this mess. I should warn you that the debate option might be complicated by the fact that linear time is starting to get a bit wobbly in that sector." The Council, for once, didn't need time to deliberate. Authorization was granted so quickly that several species broke their own records for decision-making speed. Captain Martinez Jack spoke into his comm unit. "You are hereby authorized to proceed with protocol. We totally told you so. Try to keep the smugness to professional levels." "Acknowledged," Ambassador Martinez replied, and Jack could hear the grin in her voice. "Beginning containment procedures. And sir, Form I-24H has been filed. The official recording of an I told you so moment, with all applicable appendices, including subsection C temporal and spatial distortions resulting from ignored advice. Jack looked around the council chamber at the assembled delegates, all of whom were watching in horror as their harvest fleet learned some important lessons about respecting warning signs. He said, unable to completely hide his satisfaction, shall we discuss proper containment procedures? I believe we humans have some experience in this area. The reality tumor pulsed ominously on the display, as if agreeing that yes, this would be an excellent time to listen to the humans. For once, no one argued. Captain Martinez stood on the bridge of the Schadenfreude, watching the reality tumor do things to space-time that would make a physicist cry. Her crew, unlike the panicking harvest fleet, moved with practiced precision. They'd drilled for this. They'd trained for this. They'd even had t-shirts made, reading Reality Tumor Response Team, because someone has to clean up this mess. Status report, she commanded, taking another sip from her coffee mug, which now appeared to contain liquid that existed in 3 different states of matter simultaneously. Reality fractures spreading at predicted rates, Captain, her science officer, reported. The harvest fleet's attempts to escape are just making it worse. Turns out, trying to flee from a reality distortion at faster than light speeds creates some interesting paradoxes. Let me guess, they're now arriving before they left. Some of them are arriving before the universe began. Ma-am. Martinez nodded. Standard rookie mistake. Commander Rodriguez, begin phase 1 of containment procedures. The bridge crew snapped into action. Around the Schadenfreude, the rest of the human fleet moved into formation, a formation that, unlike the harvest fleet's neat lines, looked more like a child's crayon drawing of a technical diagram. For those of you watching from the council, Martinez announced, knowing her transmission was being broadcast to the chamber, what you're about to see is why humans are particularly good at dealing with cosmic horrors. You see, most species, when confronted with tears in the fabric of reality, try to apply logic. They try to make sense of it. They attempt to impose order on chaos. She paused as her fleet executed a maneuver that made several council physicists faint. We humans, on the other hand, learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to deal with impossible things is to do something equally impossible right back at them. Launch the Quantum Crayons, she ordered. The council observers watched in confusion as the human fleet released what appeared to be giant, crystalline constructs that pulsed with rainbow energies. These crayons, humans did love their whimsical naming conventions, began drawing patterns in space itself, creating what looked like a child's attempt to doodle on the universe. You see. Martinez continued her explanation. We discovered this reality tumor 5 years ago when one of our exploration ships accidentally ran into it. We lost 3 weeks trying to solve it with mathematics. We lost another 2 weeks trying to contain it with technology. Then one of our junior engineers, who had been up for 72 hours straight surviving on nothing but coffee and spite, suggested we try something stupid. The Quantum Crayons continued their work, drawing impossible patterns around the reality distortion. The harvest fleet, those ships that still existed in conventional space-time, had stopped trying to escape and were watching in bewilderment. The thing about reality warping phenomena, Martinez explained, is that they operate on dream logic. You know how in dreams you can solve complex problems with solutions that make absolutely no sense once you wake up? Well, we figured out that these things operate on similar principles. So we stopped trying to make sense of it and started fighting fire with nonsense. On the tactical display, the Quantum Crayons had almost completed their pattern, a massive, multi-dimensional child's drawing of a box around the reality tumor. It was the kind of box a 5-year-old would draw, complete with wobbly lines and corners that didn't quite match up. It was, by any scientific standard, completely wrong. It was also, somehow, working. The secret. Martinez said, unable to keep a hint of pride from her voice, is that these things can't handle being treated like a child's puzzle. They're cosmic horrors. They're used to causing madness and terror. They expect you to either run screaming or try to fight them with science. But if you come at them with the logic of a kindergartner's art project, no defense against that. The pattern was complete. The reality tumor, which had been happily warping space-time and causing chaos, suddenly found itself contained within what amounted to a cosmic crayon box. It pulsed in what seemed like confusion. Now for Phase 2, Martinez announced. Deploy the Timeout Corner. From the Schadenfreude's hold emerged what appeared to be a giant, multidimensional version of a children's timeout chair. It was pink. It had stickers on it. It made several council scientists develop spontaneous migraines just looking at it. Fun fact, Martinez continued, clearly enjoying herself. Reality warping phenomena hate being treated like misbehaving children. They're cosmic forces of chaos and destruction. They have dignity, or at least they think they do. The Timeout Corner moved into position, its very presence seeming to offend the laws of physics. The Reality Tumor's pulsing took on what could only be described as an indignant frequency. Commander Rodriguez Martinez ordered, "Please inform our cosmic friend of the rules." Rodriguez cleared his throat and spoke in what any parent would recognize as the "you're in big trouble, mister." Voice, you sit in that corner and think about what you've done. No warping reality, no breaking physics, and absolutely no creating new dimensions until you can play nicely with existing space-time. The Reality Tumor's pulsing changed to something that seemed remarkably like a cosmic sulk. And that, distinguished delegates, Martinez concluded her transmission to the Council, is how humans deal with cosmic horrors. We don't try to understand them. We don't try to fight them with conventional weapons. We just treat them like misbehaving children until they get embarrassed and behave themselves. The Harvest Fleet, or what remained of it in conventional spacetime, was being safely towed out of the system by human rescue ships. The Reality Tumor sat in its Timeout Corner, its reality warping effects now contained within a crayon-drawn box that should not have worked by any known laws of physics, but did anyway. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving messages from the Council. They're asking how we came up with this solution." Martinez smiled. "Tell them the truth. Tell them we let our most sleep-deprived engineers brainstorm while watching children's television shows. Sometimes the best solutions come from embracing absurdity." She looked at the contained Reality Tumor, still sulking in its Timeout Corner. After all, when reality stops making sense, sometimes the only sensible response is to stop making sense right back at it. 1 week after the Epsilon Proxima incident, Jack Murphy stood before the Galactic Council again. The chamber felt different, this time quieter, more attentive, and notably more respectful. Amazing what a little reality warping cosmic horror could do for diplomatic relations. Distinguished delegates, Jack began, fighting to keep a straight face, "I believe we need to discuss the creation of new protocols regarding warning signs and their importance." Delegate Craxtell, whose tentacles had yet to fully unknot themselves from last week's panic, raised an appendage. "The Council fully agrees with Earth's position on this matter. We have already begun implementing new regulations requiring all member species to heed warning beacons, regardless of their origin." His tentacles twisted into what Jack recognized as the configuration for profound embarrassment. "We have also created a special addendum for warnings, specifically from humans." Oh, Jack raised an eyebrow. "And what does this addendum say?" "If humans say don't touch something," Delegate Vorthak interjected, his tentacles still slightly trembling, "don't touch it. If humans say don't go somewhere, don't go there. And if humans try to warn you about something while filling out preventative paperwork, assume the situation is even worse than they're suggesting." The Council chamber murmured in agreement. Several delegates were still undergoing therapy for what they'd seen on the displays during the incident. The Krevan representatives had needed their quantum processors completely reset after trying to calculate the mathematical impossibilities they'd witnessed. We have also Delegate NX Tara chimed in, her crystalline form vibrating at a frequency Jack recognized as nervous respect created a new classification system for human warnings. They now range from mild concern, probably just death, to extreme warning. Reality itself objects to this. Jack nodded approvingly. "I see. And have you filed the appropriate paperwork for these new classifications?" The Council collectively winced. After a moment, Craxtell spoke up again. We were hoping Earth might assist us with the proper forms. We've noticed your species has a particular talent for bureaucratic preparation regarding cosmic disasters." Jack smiled, pulling out his tablet. "As it happens, I have just the form you need. Form N27L, application for retroactive recognition of human warning validity. It comes with an appendix for admission of cosmic hubris and a subsection for promise to actually listen next time." In the back of the chamber, Captain Martinez, who had been invited to give a technical briefing on the containment procedures, leaned over to Commander Rodriguez. 10 credits says they ask about the space sharks next. Right on cue, Delegate Vorthak cleared his throat, speaking of human warnings. About those space sharks we tried to domesticate. Fawn B13P, Jack replied without missing a beat. Requesting assistance with previously ignored warning-related incidents, would you like the standard version, or the one specifically for bioengineering mishaps? As the council chamber filled with the sounds of bureaucratic negotiations and the rustling of digital paperwork, Jack couldn't help but reflect on the peculiar nature of human problem-solving. Humanity had joined the galactic community expecting to be the new kids, the ones who had everything to learn. Instead, they'd found themselves becoming the universe's collective voice of reason, the species that looked at cosmic horrors and reality-breaking phenomena and said, "You know what this needs? A timeout corner and some paperwork." "Oh, one more thing," Jack added, addressing the council. "We've noticed some unusual readings from the Gamma Centauri sector. Something about probability waves acting like particle waves and cause and effect playing musical chairs with each other. We're filing a preliminary warning about it now." The council fell silent. Every delegate straightened in their pods. Craxtel's tentacles arranged themselves into what Jack now recognized as the "we're actually going to listen this time" configuration. "Please," Craxtel said, with what appeared to be genuine humility, "tell us more about these readings, and perhaps you could help us fill out the appropriate preventative forms." Jack smiled. Sometimes, he reflected, the best way to teach an advanced alien civilization to respect humanity was to show them that the universe was weird enough to need humanity's particular brand of weird right back. "Of course," he replied, pulling up the necessary forms. "Let's start with Form P420, prevention of yet another completely avoidable cosmic disaster. I've taken the liberty of filling out the 'we told you so' section in advance." This time, no one laughed. They were too busy taking notes.